Hey guys, Carl Gruber here. So, I have a question for you. What if you suddenly found yourself flying out of your body, catapulting through a cosmic array of light?
I don't know any of this, but sometime during that night, uh, I left my body and I was no longer Bill. I was flying through this star filled realm, this sea of stars, these colored balls, these orbs.
Only to suddenly find yourself face to face with three short, giggling, hooded beings who look just like the ones from the 1989 movie Communion.
And right in front of me were these three little hooded guys. And they were overwhelmed with joy to see me. Three little guys, they were dark hoods and squatty little bodies, and they were about 4 foot tall. And they looked exactly like those guys that Christopher Walken is with in the movie Communion.
And feeling an overwhelming knowing that you had come home and were in a place of total unconditional love. Well, that's exactly what happened to my guest Bill Letson when he had a near-death experience. This is one show you don't want to miss. Join us for Bill Letson's full story of his amazing near-death experience and his visit to the angelic realm, right here on World Awakenings. This is going to blow your mind.
This is World Awakenings, the fast track to enlightenment with your host, Carl Gruber. World Awakenings is a podcast dedicated to opening your mind, your heart, and your eyes to the fact that the world's population is now, more than ever, awakening to all things spiritual, metaphysical, and enlightening, and just how they play an all-important role in our daily life. So join Carl on this enlightening experience as he interviews metaphysical and spiritual experts to discuss, debate, and delve deeply into the hows and whys of this worldwide awakening.
Hey, this is World Awakenings, the fast track to enlightenment, the show that offers you a unique and in-depth look at all things spiritual, metaphysical, and enlightening by talking one-on-one with some of the world's best teachers, experts, and masters. Now, before we meet with our featured guest for this show, please take a moment to click the link below to download your free copy of my ebook, The Three Pillars, a simple three-step process to manifest positive and permanent change in your life. A book that will help you go onto the path to live the life you love and love the life you live. So, although this is 130th episode of this show, we have spoken to many guests who have had incredible metaphysical and spiritual experiences. Now, today's guest is very first one who is going to go in depth about his astounding N.D.E. or near-death experience. Bill Letson is our guest, and after a 35-year career as a California firefighter and forester, he retired. However, before his retirement, he underwent a profound near-death experience where he separated from his physical body, traveled through a star-filled realm, and interacted with some very strange otherworldly beings before returning to his body here on Earth, back to daily life. And with that, holy mackerel, welcome, Bill. I'm looking forward to hearing your amazing story.
Hi, Carl. Thanks for having me. This is quite an honor.
Yeah, oh my gosh, I'm so grateful to have you here. And like I mentioned, I've talked to a lot of amazing guests but I've never had anybody go really into the deep experience that they've had in NDEs. And I think many of us who study this realm of spirituality and metaphysics and enlightenment, we learn that a lot of people have near-death experiences, and many of their experiences, while unique, are also very similar in nature.
Yeah, I think there's similarities in all of them. And the NDEers are, with all these podcasts that came up in the last year and a half, they just all of a sudden, like a tsunami broke. Um, there was the old guard, which I'm kind of the tail end of that, and there was a few dozen NDEers, and then all these people started leaving comments, and then the podcasters would contact them and say, "Hey, you have a really good story,"
Mhm.
and there are thousands of people that are being interviewed. So it's something all humans are connected to, and
Yeah. Well,
and they're
well,
and they're talking about it all of a sudden.
well, I'm curious, before we dive into your experience, was there anything in your life when you were growing up and as a young man that would indicate that you had any particular metaphysical or spiritual experiences or powers?
Yeah, when I was a little kid, I at that place coming out of sleep, coming out of sleeping, dreaming, back into waking, there I would be with these very playful, very joyful beings, and I couldn't see them. It was shrouded somehow. I could see that lower half of them, but there was always giggling and always playfulness, and um, I knew it as a kid. And then when my wife, I met her, in my 20s, and she said, every so often you're waking up and you're talking in this nonsensical language, and you're laughing and you're giggling, and I go, yeah, I'm with these guys. I don't know what it is. It's some kind of it's very real, but it's a reoccurring thing with me. I've had it since I was a kid, and so I had that, and then my grandmother was a seer,
Oh,
and my mom was, all our lives, my mom would say, tell my dad, tell him to stay out of helicopters this week, or tell him not to go surfing this week. And he would come to me, and it was all on a down low. It was all hush hush,
hmm.
because she was taught, to hide it. It was a curse or an embarrassment or something, and that came from my grandmother, who also had this seeing. And I had an uncle tell me recently that the way she operated was, my grandmother, was she had to get word to the person that she had the vision of, and then she felt like she did her part.
Hmm.
And that's what we grew up with. But
And back many decades ago, that was just not the type of thing you talked about, but people think you were cuckoo. you know?
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, exactly.
Was your household growing up, was it a religious household?
We were raised Catholic, and went through all the ceremonies and rituals and stuff. So, and we were expected to go to church on Sunday. And when you got out of the house, got off to college and stuff, that sort of, for me, that sort of dropped away. And I spent time, in nature. That's where I felt more connected to, in the divine side of life, and not in the church. And lots of people tried to take me into, different types of church, and I never stuck around.
Mhm.
I felt better going for a long run in the hills with a dog.
Me
That
too.
was very, very spiritual.
Yeah. Well, the reason I asked that, I was wondering if you thought maybe that had any influence on your experience.
I think that I think the cards were dealt for the experience to be there, but it was up to me to recognize it and
Hmm.
to allow it.
Yeah.
That's what I think. And I eventually, in my 60s, I did. I said, okay, we have this incredibly profound side to us that nobody's talking about,
Yeah.
and that came, and once you recognize that and I don't know, honor it, then it just comes rushing forward. That's what the other side's looking for. They're looking for us to wake up to who we really are.
Well, let's go ahead and dive right into this. So, I mentioned that in the intro that you were a firefighter and forester. I was wondering if you could lay the groundwork for us about your life, what you did, and your incredible near-death experience. I think that was in 1994. What led you to experiencing this? I mean, you were a strong, healthy firefighter. What happened?
Yeah, it was 1994, and I was a strong, healthy firefighter. I was, doing Ironmans and
Wow.
crazy those guys are nuts with their workouts. Swim before swim before work, run at lunch, and weights and yoga and at night, and then as soon as you got a long day, you're on a bike for 5 hours. So that was my life for 25 years. And so yeah, I was real healthy back then. I was in my late 30s and loved my job. It would do anything to serve others. It never, you don't want to get into some kind of foolhardy situation, but it was always worth it, to climb into a car that was teetering over the edge, to get to some people. It was no hesitation, and lots of firefighters are like that, and so are cops and military people. They're and nurses and teachers and things too. They're this public service, this service to others is foremost. Um, it's like you came into the world and you have to be this person. Um, so yeah, that's what led me into the fire service, and I loved it. And in '94, we went to a severely ill patient, and there was a flu epidemic. And did you want me to get into that
Oh yeah,
brief?
absolutely. I would love to hear about that.
Okay, and we went to this one lady, and it was during this flu epidemic. The emergency rooms were all full, and the hospitals were full. And we went to this one lady, and she was cooped up in her room. Her neighbors called, said they hadn't seen her a while, so we broke in, found her in the back bedroom, and she was in a lot of trouble. And so we just sprung into action, and I climbed across the bed and got a mask on her, and she kind of realized that she had firemen all around her, and she let out this big exhale, like, thank
Oh,
God thank God you're here. Um, and I was taking a breath in, and I breathed her um, breath straight in. I could feel her hot breath go right down my into my lungs.
hmm.
And we got her to the hospital, and she was, admitted, and she came home a few days later, and that was all a save and very happy ending. And we went on days off, and I got really sick really fast. Within a couple of days, I was really dehydrated. My pulse was racing, my blood pressure was tanking, and I ended up in the hospital, the emergency room, and there was lots of kids and adults there at the same time, all with the same thing. And staff was overwhelmed, and so they were just like broadcast prescribing everybody, something for nausea, something for pain. And I'd had a couple, by the time the nurse came in with the medication, I'd had a couple of bags of IV, a couple of liters, and I was starting to feel semi-normal. And I said, I don't think I need any drugs or anything. I just go home. And she said, nope, the doctor hasn't even seen you, and you came in by ambulance, so you're not going anywhere. And she said, this is the orders. And she pushed it in she's in a hurry. She's a good nurse, but she pushed it in the port, the injection port. And my wife was there, and she said, your eyes just rolled back and you fell straight back on the bed.
Oh wow.
And, I came in there, as far as volume of fluids and stuff, I came in there on my knees. And then, the stuff that she gave me, this new bane, this synthetic morphine, that's a vasodilator. And so it just, grew the system really big. And so whatever pressure or perfusion I was getting just dropped out. And it happened really super fast. It was like as soon as she put it in. And so my wife, the rest of it is just what I heard from my wife, but she said it scared him. And everybody came in the room, and they Narcaned you immediately. And Narcan is something that gobbles up opiates.
Mhm.
It's immediately effective. We used to use it on heroin overdoses and opiate overdoses. And she wrote it down 3 times that they Narcan me 5-10 minutes apart, and I wasn't coming back. That was such a I guess an insult to the blood pressure mechanism that I wasn't coming back. And they put me in a head down, kept the IVs, full bore, and shipped me up to intensive care. And I spent the night there. And I don't know any of this, but sometime during that night, I left my body, and I was no longer Bill. I was flying through this um, star-filled realm, this sea of stars, these colored balls, these orbs. And it was like I was in space, and in that space were all these colored vibrating balls, different colors, different emotions coming off them. And I was just being paraded through. It was like I was being welcomed back. And all I felt was acceptance and belonging and being held and being loved and joy. And that person that I was, it was like, it seemed like it was a joke or something. It was a trick, because I was this huge expanded cloud. I was this huge expanded cloud of awareness, like a huge balloon that went on forever. And it felt like a cool breeze was blowing through every cell, and somebody was pouring honey over my brain. It was running down, and all my, I heard somebody else say this and it fits. All my cells were giggling with just euphoria. And I've called it a cosmic orgasm.
Yeah.
And it had a very, creative, sensual
Mhm.
nature to it. That is the universe, I believe. And I had felt like looking back, I was like, as I was flying along, I was thinking, man, what in the heck was that? Uh, duty as a human. And it's like I was like, that was rough. And there was nothing rough about my life. It was a charmed life. California surfer with a wonderful family, and everything perfect, education. But to me, it was super rough, and it has to do with the emotions, the vibrations that um, exist here, that are allowed to exist here, and only exist here. And I felt like I'd been in a hot, dark, stuffy closet, and I was released from that, and a just huge expanded um, cloud of awareness with this cool breeze blowing through every cell. And it was euphoria. And I flew along like that for a while. That was definitely a limitless, unbridled realm where everything is possible and it's eternal and um, infinite. That was a feeling I had, and I was so happy to be back in that.
Mhm.
That's where we all come from. And I was flying along, and then all of a sudden, I was someplace else. I was in this, it was like a clinic or a facility, and there was lighting there. I didn't feel quite as expanded, but I was still incredibly joyful. And um, so there's indirect lighting. There was equipment hanging from the ceiling and on the walls. There were beds
Mhm.
there and tables and things. And it looked like a clinic or a facility of some sort. And right in front of me were these three little hooded guys. And they were overwhelmed with joy to see me. They were bouncing up and down and giggling and turning back and forth to each other. And I was just looking at them like, well, where am I now? And um, they were saying, how was it? What did you learn? What can you tell us? And, um, they were very playful and um, joyful, and they were sweethearts. And, going back to that thing you asked me in the beginning, what was coming out of sleep as a child, who was I talking to and giggling with and stuff? And I think it was these guys,
Yeah.
and I think we all have them.
Mhm.
Um, I think we all go to these realms. We're just not supposed to know about it. We're supposed to we're supposed to get through what we're going through here. These challenges, making the sacrifices, and even suffering here and then, until we decide we're not going to suffer anymore. We're not going to focus on the bad, and then that sort of ends for us. But yeah, they were. One of them came forward. The three little guys. They were dark hoods and squatty little bodies, and they're about 4 foot tall,
Mm.
and they looked exactly like those uh, guys that Christopher Walken is with in the movie Communion. And I know that's supposed to be a horror film, but I think a lot of those emotions, they come with the music, the vibration in the soundtrack,
Mhm.
and I think that just it kind of entrains us, and we start to believe this is something to be fearful of. And if you turn the sound off and watch it, those guys are a kick. They're high-fiving him, and they're doing all kinds of fun things, and they're bouncing around, and they're they're nice guys. And there's kids in that movie. There's kids in that facility, young souls, whatever, and he sees them interact with these children, and so yeah, they looked exactly like that. And I saw the movie years later. It
Uh,
wasn't some it wasn't something I was programmed with. And I mean, like recently, within the last 5 years, I saw a picture of them on a trailer or something, and I'm like, well, what the heck is that? Because that looks exactly like what I saw. And then I watched the movie, and I was like, oh my goodness, it's right there, um, for everyone to see if they know what they're looking at. Um, So one of them came forward, and he was joyful and chuckling and smiling and stuff. And he looked me up and down really hard, and he turned to the other two and he goes, "He doesn't remember us." And they all started giggling wildly. Um, and I was like, "Well, I kind of remember you guys, but this is all very strange for me. All of a sudden, I'm in this cartoon world, like." And so they were giggling, and they were great. They were wonderful. Felt right at home with them immediately. And then there was this other guy, and he was this tall, wispy guy, and he looked like somebody. I was looking at somebody underwater. He had this spinning nature to him, this like vortex or this like tornado, and he had a big smile, bright eyes, and when he came forward, the the top part would separate, and then the rest would like catch up, like this moving, like this moving cyclone or something. And he was, I've said lots of things that he looked like a Gumby or um, a walking stick insect. I've tried all these ways to explain it, but yeah, it was an energetic being. I call him the tall, wispy guy. And when he came forward, he was really happy to see me, and I could feel the love he had for me, and it was so powerful that like when you watch a movie and it's about a dog that gets reunited with his owner or something, and you start to choke up, and you don't want to cry in the theater, and you're feeling your chest expand. And that's what I felt, like 100 times more powerful than I've ever felt here.
wow.
And it felt like the proper thing to do was to fall to your knees and break down in uncontrollable crying from love.
Mhm.
Um, like a mother's love for a child. This is, I've come to realize this is why mothers cry when they take their child to kindergarten the first day, because so he came close, and I felt nothing but love. There was this back and forth stuff, and every time I said something, and I didn't have a mouth, I didn't have vocal cords, but it was everybody should realize that when you transition over, a lot of people don't even know they've died
Mhm.
because the transition is so seamless, and so you're still seeing things, you're still speaking. Um, but of course you don't have eyes or a mouth or vocal cords. So it's just very natural to be back in that divine realm. And so every time I, had little things to say about this and that, and every time I said something, he just had this chuckle, this laugh, and he was chuckling at everything. And the little guys were bouncing around and they were giggling. And every time he chuckled, I could feel it inside of me. It was like I was chuckling. And um, at one point I said, well, I'm in this facility now and I'm not, it's obviously, I'm not going to stay here forever. And so I was like, so what's next? You guys, are we going to do a review of my life and then I can move on? And would you guys like to get started with that? Because I had a taste of that other realm. I just arrived and I'm like, I want to be there.
Mhm.
And so he just cracked up. When I said, you guys want to get started with that, and he just cracked up and he said, sure, let's do that. How do you want to start? And so I've told a few stories, nothing, no big regrets. And it was not a typical life review like you hear people talk about, watching their lives in these little bubble screens and how you affect others and all that. It was none of that. It was just me telling some stories and nobody was listening. Nobody, I was being humored and they didn't care. And they were just, like I said, giggling and bouncing around. And he was chuckling at everything I said. And then he just, like a father, and he just stepped forward to the toddler who thought he was in charge. And he said, okay, time to go back. And that just shocked me. I'm like, go back. I'm like, I'm like, dude, there's no way I'm going back there. You don't understand. That is really difficult place. And he goes, no, you're going back. You got things to do. And it's kind of laughing about it. And like, yeah, you'll be fine. And he comes forward and I felt the place breaking up. I tried a few things, that I was almost 40 and what's the point? I'm pretty much used up old guy. And I tried a lot of different things, that my parents and my wife, they're strong people. They'll get over it. They'll learn to get along without me. And he laughed at all of those things. And then he said, okay, you're going back. And the place just started dematerializing. It started evaporating, swirling. And I felt myself dropping, a physical dropping in frequency.
Mhm.
And he just sort of he just sort of disassociated. He just kind of came apart in this swirling mass. And I dropped away into darkness. And it was a definite descending feeling, a drop in vibration. And I found myself down in this place and I knew I was near my body. And it was a lonely place, nothing like where I just was, not even nothing like that. And it was lonely and I was separate. I was cut off. It was dismal and you didn't want to stay there. You could feel just this dark um, loneliness. And I was near my body and then I was back in my body and some time went by and I started waking up slowly. The machines were, taking automatic blood pressure machine was squeezing me every 10 or 15 minutes. And I would wake up and look at the numbers and I just watched the vital signs on these machines climb back, pulse and blood pressure. And I don't know, 4 or 5 in the morning, I was sitting up looking around because it had climbed back over some hours. And a nurse came by and she's like, you're awake. And she was really shocked. And I'm like, yeah, I'm awake. I need to talk to you. And she goes, well, I got to go tell a doctor. We didn't know what was going on with you. If you were going to come back to us, this has been we've all been worried all night. And I said, okay, that's cool. You guys can all go get the doctor and we'll have a chat. But I go, but first, I looked at her and I said, what am I doing back here? I was pissed. And she must have, that must have cracked, but she was an old nurse, one of those gum chewers. And she rebounded really fast. And I told her, "Oh, what am I doing back here? I was home. I was out of this place. It was behind, and I was with my best friends, and
Mhm.
I had bought the farm. I had died. I was sure of it." And she said, "Honey, you've been in escrow, but you fell out of escrow, and now you're back with us." And, she had her hands on my two shoulders, and she goes, "You're going to have to get your head around that." And um, I was talking to this medium friend, and she goes, "Oh, that nurse grounded you immediately." And I'm like, "She did. She did, because I was sad for several days. Sad, a deep sadness that was in every cell. But I was also, you know, okay, I got to get back in this life and, as they say, chop wood and carry water and get up every day and do the things to keep this life going, because, I was sent back for some reason.
Mhm.
And I think that reason is unfolding right now, especially in the last year. It's and I'll make a prediction. This is going to, some of these videos, they're seeing 100,000 views, and some of them are millions. It's going to go absolutely crazy worldwide in the coming years, because I think there's going to be a deep interest in are we, who are we really? We,
Mhm.
we don't have the answers in the mainstream. And that's what's happening now. It's just trickling in, but the interest is going to um, take off like a wildfire.
And what you just said there, this podcast is part of that. This is one of the reasons I started, because I sensed and I intuited that there is an awakening like never before in human history right now. Like I say, spiritual, metaphysical, and enlightening. Wow, what an incredible story, And, I guess people wouldn't think, well, you wake up back in your body, you wouldn't think you would be pissed about it. But I mean, like you just
Pissed.
described, I mean, you felt like you were home with these guys who were just joking around with you, and nothing but unconditional love. What was the reaction of the people around you, like your wife, family, and friends, when you told them what you experienced during your NDE?
Yeah, I was as soon as the doctor got there, a few other nurses and stuff came along, because I was a project overnight. And I was just like blah 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 blah, the tall wispy guy, the three little guys, and flying through this sea of stars, and you won't believe it. And I was full of the other side, and I was pretty much considered crazy. And the doctor even told me, he says, "You need to button that up." And he says, "None of that happened." And I'm like, "Yes, it did." I'm an old enough to realize that it was something really cool.
Mhm.
And so, yeah, my parents were brought in, my wife was brought in, and then I was like, "Oh, you guys, I gotta tell you this, I gotta tell you this." And uh, yeah, I went back to work, a few days later. I was on the couch for a week or so, and then I went back to work, and then all the guys, especially the religious guys, they're like,
Mhm.
"Hey, dude, I heard something really wild happened to you." And I'd sit them down and I'd tell them, the whole story,
Mhm.
anybody who asked.
Mhm.
And, after a few weeks, the fire department, they don't like to have kooks, in their ranks. And so I was told, "Hey, you need to watch what watch what you're talking about with that story." And so I said, "Okay, I get it. I get it." I would have thought I was a kook too.
Mhm.
So yeah, I zipped it, and I dummied up for about 15 years until I retired in 2010. Um, but that thing we were just talking about, this awakening. I ask
Mhm.
every, like you said, I've done lots of interviews, And I asked you guys, eyeball to eyeball, sometimes eye to eyeball, sometimes screen to screen, but I ask all of you, how is it that you're doing this? And every one of them is, like you said, there's something happening. There's something happening in the world. It's something inside me. You know, this is how the other side works. You're being called, you're being touched, and you know, that message is going out far and wide. But you guys are the first ones to, report for duty.
Well, and
And
I think what's happening with people like myself and other podcast guests or whatever realm they work in, especially at my point in my life, I'm a tiny bit older now, but I've at some point I've realized that this is my purpose. My purpose is to help people gain this message through beautiful people like you, Bill, and relaying your amazing story and all these other guests. And I think just my podcast, other podcasts, like I said, could be books written, movies. It is a part. Each is an integral part of the awakening of humanity, and it's a beautiful time.
yeah, it's amazing. It's amazing time. It's really cool. It's really exciting. Um, and I'm near enough to Hollywood, and I get interviewed, and I asked these guys once. I said, somebody is organizing all you startup, filmmakers. Somebody's tapping you on the shoulder. Somebody, and they're like, no, one day I just said this was something I need to do. Um, so it's not, there's not some conspiracy going on to confuse everybody. This is divine intervention into, people's lives and how they think.
And I absolutely agree with you on that. I think too, another thing as a longtime spiritual student, I think I've started to listen, or I should say, I started to pay attention when I feel that tap on the shoulder. So, hey, wait, why don't you do this? It's not necessarily in words, but it's just relayed to you. Do you know that this is what you're supposed to do? But I do have a question for you. So you had, from that moment, that time, you went 15 years of kind of zipping it up, and then you retired and you were able to open up to relay this experience to people and talk more about it. What I've read about you, you've gotten into since that time into plant medicine ceremonies, kundalini, studies of consciousness. Was your N.D.E. obviously the instigation to investigate these and experience these other realms?
Yeah, it is. I just, we were talking about something a second ago, and I just want to give you this because you told me that I woke up pissed, upset.
Hmm.
And when a baby comes into the world,
They're
they
crying.
come into the world crying, you know. And a lot of NDEers say this when they come back. It's like, oh, damn, I'm back here. I just want to cry about it. Uh, So
Yeah.
yeah, the thing with so my NDE was in '94, retired in 2010, and I was cycling, I was playing in some bands. That's something that came from my NDE. I went and bought some drums a few
Cool.
years afterwards and picked it up immediately. Got into some really good, I don't know how, never had a lesson. And it just seemed really super easy that music was, mathematics. And it's just a matter of counting, and lumping groups of four, uh, and it just seems super easy. And so anyway, um, yeah, that my NDE, yeah, in 2010, 2011, I was enjoying myself. 2012, that's a big date. They say that it was supposed to be the end of the world.
It's yeah,
Um,
right.
but
Mhm.
the Mayan calendar, and the precession of the equinox, the great year, and all that, that was we bottomed out at the bottom of that Iron Age. That precession of the equinox, that endless eternal cycle of how things go here on Earth. with a golden age being those Egyptians, Atlantis, all that. And, we've sunk all the way down to the bottom, and we turned the corner, and now light is coming back into the planet. And 2012, December 2012, that was the point. And it's it's happening. I mean, it's absolutely happening, and it's picking up speed with each year.
Well, what took you into those other experiences? I think I have that right. You did some plant ceremonies in the Kundalini. What, just part of your investigation into these other things?
Yeah, for some reason, 2013, 2012, 2013, I just started going down to Costa Rica and
Hmm.
renting a car and driving around. And, I was on the nicer roads, then I was in the potholed roads, then I was on the dirt roads, and then I was on the trails. And I was with these groups, shamans and people who lived in villages, people from all over the world who would make their own village, uh, communes and things like that. And I was getting, I didn't really understand it. It was just something that was telling me, you need to get on a plane and go down there and stay weeks, months. And I
Right.
kept doing it for like 3 years. And and one of the things that had happened around 2012 is I just read I saw the video of Rick Strassman's DMT, the spirit molecule.
Oh, okay.
It's a really good video, and I don't know why I watched it. I never watched any drug stuff. That's not my world. And then the book came up as an Amazon recommendation, and something in my head says, yeah, that's sort of that book. And looking back, it's like, why'd I do that? I just watched the video. Anyway, the book came, and if you read that book, um, it'll talk all about the beings that I saw, and the immense variety of beings that are non-physical beings that are all around us. And so, yeah, chapter 13 and 14 is something like contact through the veil. And what Straussman was doing was injecting DMT into his 70 volunteers. And DMT is what the pineal gland, our third eye, it makes DMT. And when we go to sleep at night, it drops a little drop on our brain, and that puts us into soul travel. All those wild dreams where you're with your high school math teacher and you're building a go-kart or something. Those are things that you're actually doing in other dimensions, other realms, with your real self. These crazy things, um, and that's what the pineal gland does. And at the time of death, the pineal gland splashes the brain with a megadose of DMT, a natural forming thing, just like insulin or adrenaline. It's part of the body, and that rockets the soul out of the body. And this is what the shamans had figured out. They get DMT out of plants,
Hmm.
and this is the ayahuasca, the yahe, the plant medicine. And so I'd read this in this book, and I was going down there, and one of the places I was staying, the lady came to me, and she said, she asked me to help her with this pavilion, this place out in the jungle, and clean it up. So I was helping her clean it up, and I said, well, what's going on? And she says, well, we have a taita, a shaman coming, and we have a couple dozen people that are going to be here. And um, I go, what's the thing? And she said, well, it's an ayahuasca ceremony. And I was like, whoa, that's something that's on my bucket list because of this, because this DMT, the spirit molecule book, um, his volunteers were seeing the same three funny little joyful guys and the taller guy that was in charge, um, over and over. And it's like, wait, it freaked me out for about a week, because I was like, wait a minute, this is my little thing that happened, 20 years ago. This isn't, everybody doesn't, have a piece of this, but they do. We all do. And so, some time went by, and I signed up for one of those ceremonies, and it was really profound. I don't recommend it to anybody, um, because it's very powerful. It's a, it's actually a death experience.
Mm.
It's a forced astral travel um, type thing. It's a you sit down and drink a glass of NDE and wait for an hour for it to happen. And it can go all kinds of places because we ultimately are in charge of our reality, our thoughts. Um,
Mhm.
and when you cross into that realm and you're fearful and confused, well, you're going to have a fearful and confused 4 hours, and it's going to be a really harsh experience.
Yeah, I've had my friend and colleague Isabel Stahl from Norway, even though she's Swedish, she has spent quite a bit of time in those places like you did in Costa Rica, and she has done a number of ayahuasca ceremonies. Now, I've never experienced it myself. It's kind of on my bucket list. And but that's the first time I've heard it described as an N.D.E experience. But I mean, it sure sounds from what Isabel and other people say similar to what you have. Now, when you did your ayahuasca ceremony, your DMT, did you see your friends again, the same ones that you met in that clinic?
No, I didn't. Um, what happened to me was I was sitting there like, this is folklore and nothing's really going to happen. And, something, um, if anybody's going to get through this without a scratch, it'll be me. And, this complete lack of humility.
Mm-hmm.
And this is like 10 years ago. And when the ceiling of the pavilion opened up and there was this colorful DNA spiral, giant spiral, disappearing into a space I didn't know, and light was coming from all the different pillars. You couldn't look away. It was incredible to me that this was happening, that my visual cortex was being bombarded with this vision from the pineal gland, and it was filling um, my eyes were underneath this vision, my physical eyesight. And I watched that for a while, and I started getting good and worked up about it, anxiety, and curled up in a ball. And about sometime after that, 30 minutes after that or something, I woke up over my bucket, um, because when you do ayahuasca, there's this purge, and it's you're purging the bad energy that is in your soul, in your body. And the whole time, it felt like somebody was punching me in the liver and punching me in the kidneys and in the lungs. And I was like, "What?" I asked him, "What's going on? I feel like I'm getting punched." And the shaman's assistant, he said, "Well, it's the medicine's going through. It's collecting all that bad energy that you don't want, and it's going to bring it all to the stomach, and you're going to you're going to get rid of it."
Mm-hmm.
And that's what happened. Um, I woke up over my bucket and I just let out this roaring discharge, and it was mostly air, and it sounded like a jet engine. And I had some friends that were, on their mats nearby, and the next day they were like, "Dude, what was that?" And I said, "You don't know that. You don't know half of it." But what I saw was this like bluish black mass came out of me. It was like a energy. It wasn't from the world we know. It was like an energy or a gel or a vapor or smoke, and it stayed together and it moved across the floor. And the shaman saw it immediately, and he told one of his guys, "Go over there and sweep that area out into the jungle." And
Mm.
they came over with, branches, and they swept it out. And I was just looking at it, watching it, and I looked around and I said, "What is happening?" And they don't. when you hang out with these guys, they're not like us. They're not talking nonstop. They're not talking hardly at all. And a year later, I bought a guy lunch and I go, "What happened that night?" And he said, just like we told you, the energy that, you know, is not, you can't take that energy into the next realm. It stays here.
Hmm.
And so it had to come away from you. And that's why they call it a healing ceremony. It's emotional baggage.
Hmm.
It's traumas. It's emotional scars. We all have them, and some people have tons of them. And yeah, that's why it's a healing ceremony. And that healing, removing that energy, also the body gets a huge. It's like taking a weight off the body.
Hmm.
Because the next day after the ceremony, I was our day of rest, and I went for my normal run, and it was like 7 mile run down through the town of Guiones and Nosara along the beach, and I left at like 6 in the morning, and it was around 10. I had run it 3 times, and I was coming back because I wasn't getting tired. I wasn't getting um, winded. It
Hmm.
didn't seem like I could run up any incline, and I didn't get winded. I just kept going. And yeah, I ran it 3 times, and I was starting to take off again. And one of my buddies goes, "Hey, dude, you're over 20 miles." And I go, "I can't get tired." And it was like that, ever since that. It was a big, we all carry these big burdens of emotional baggage,
Wow.
and it's really detrimental to our health and our performance.
Well, being a runner for myself for decades, gee, I guess I better do some ayahuasca before my next run. But we're talking to the amazing Bill Letson, talking about his near-death experiences and all these beautiful thoughts and learnings he's got about metaphysical and spiritual things. And one last thing, we're going to wind up here because this has been incredible to have you on the show, Bill. I honor you for sharing your story. But I know when you said when your tall wispy fellow said that it's time to go back, and you speak in terms of vibration, where everything, when you come back down into the 3D, everything becomes heavier and denser, and it wasn't a good feeling. And here we all are, right?
Yeah, here we all are. And this movie, to some people are trying to understand what I'm talking about. There's a movie called Astral City, and it has this pretty much the same thing I just said, that there is this heavenly realm, and then there is this facility where we're healed of emotional trauma. We get ready for our next lives or whatever, and then there's this physical world, and then there's this place that we don't want to go.
Hmm.
And it's in almost all religions, and we call it the valley of the shadow of death. And I really think what's going on here is that we raise our awareness and we raise our frequency to the point when we leave our bodies, we navigate that valley of the shadow of death, with ease, without fear, because we know we live forever and we can't be harmed. And if we have fearful thoughts, then that place will grab us, and we'll be stuck in some conflict, or
Hmm.
that's hell.
Yeah.
And yeah. So hey, let me leave you with this last thing.
Okay.
Um, I started saying this a few years ago, and I like what's happening because it's starting to become a thing. And I say that the real story of who we are, the truth is out there. It's in our mainstream. It's in our movies and the series and popular magazines and song lyrics. It's really there. It's a small percentage. Um, but The Wizard of Oz, that's a favorite movie of everyone. Dorothy is in that cabin. She goes in that vortex. the window comes off and hits her in the head, and she has a near-death experience. She peels away from her body. And then she lands in this place, and she's in this low vibration, lack of color
Mm.
life. Opens the door, and there's these beautiful giant flowers. Everything's colorful. And she meets these munchkins, and they come at her in groups of three. The Lollipop Guild and the dancing girls and they're all giggling, and it's all fun and delightful. And then Linda shows up, and Linda comes as this colorful orb, and that's Dorothy's higher self. And that's maybe who I met there, as a higher version of me,
Mhm.
the original. And we're all little copies down here that have these adventures. And um, so yeah, I know that might be a stretch for people, but
I
this
don't think so, Bill, because I love that analogy of the Wizard of Oz. You are my second guest in the last month that has used the Wizard of Oz as an analogy of us separating from our source and becoming dreaming that we're in this denser uncolorful realm, and then going home and then having the ability to come back. But yeah, that is a great analogy, and I encourage people to think about that analogy of the Wizard of Oz. And it's funny because I never perceived it that way until my last guest used it. I go, yeah, that's perfect. That is perfect. But one thing I'd like to find out real quickly. I'm amazed that you don't have a book about this. So, any plans to write a book about this?
Yeah, I wrote a book a few years ago, and it is called Full Contact Kundalini, because there's this whole thing about spiritual awakening and enlightenment, and then there's this other physical aspect of Kundalini, when the divine side actually energetically moves through you and you reconnect with home. Um, and we don't, in the West, we don't know about this at all. We're very confused about it. But a lot has happened in the last few years. I keep trying to update that and get it out there. I'm not charging anything for it, but I'll have it. I'll make a promise to you, Carl. I'll get it done.
All right. All right. I'd love to read it and see it. And one last thing, what's the best way if people should be interested in contacting you? Are you open to people seeking you out and
Yeah.
communicating with you? What's the best way?
B Letson, Letson 56 at Gmail.
Okay, so your email box is going to be blasted full now. That's
It
probably.
usually is, and I have this really long email with all these links to other N.D.E.ers, and
Okay.
that I tell people this will keep you busy for a long time. So
Well, all right, Bill Letson, honestly, again, I'm going to say this. I really, really honor you for sharing such your amazing story and what you are doing to help other people awake. And I'm sure you've met other NDEers who thought they were crazy until they hear that other people experienced that. What you are doing is really, you're shining. It's like the light behind you is shining on the world. You may not even realize the extent of the positive, loving influence you have on the rest of humanity, and thank you for that.
yeah, you're welcome. My pleasure. Thanks for having me.
This has been another episode of World Awakenings, the fast track to enlightenment with host Carl Gruber, a certified law of attraction life coach. We welcome you to tune in to each and every episode of World Awakenings as we open your mind, your heart, and your eyes to the fact that the world's population is now, more than ever, awakening to the truth of all things spiritual, metaphysical, and enlightening, and just how much they play an all-important role in our moment-to-moment daily life. Much love and light to you, my friend, and thank you for tuning into World Awakenings.